Good morning. It's 7:30 on Tuesday morning. I fainted twice yesterday, and it's instructive to dissect and unpack the reasons why. So let me go through this. It might take a while. Basically, it's a combination of hypotension and hypoglycemia. Now, many of you would know that for the past 3.5 years, been mostly eating one meal a day. Since October 18th, 2018. So when it comes to Ramadan, it's a non-issue, except that when I go on my one meal a day OMAD diet, I eat during daylight hours. During Ramadan, you can't eat during daylight hours. Now, many would think, what difference does it make? Well, it makes a huge difference because metabolically, if you eat after dark, food doesn't get stored as glycogen in the liver. Even if you eat carbohydrates, it goes through a different metabolic pathway, and the body converts everything you eat after dark into fat and stores it as adipose tissue. Now, glycogen is basically glucose that are zipped together, large chains of glucose forming a polysaccharide. Animal starch, if you want to put it simply. And that's stored in the liver. And whenever there's demand for energy, demand for glucose by the muscles, a signal gets sent from the pancreas to excrete two hormones. The first hormone is produced by the alpha cells of the pancreas, and it's called Glucagon. Instructs the liver to release the glycogen into the bloodstream in the form of glucose. It unzips the glycogen into glucose molecules and releases into the bloodstream, and it goes around the body. Simultaneously, another hormone is also released by the beta cells of the pancreas. This is called insulin. Insulin would go to the surface of cells, particularly muscle cells, but also the cells of glands and organs. And it will bind with the receptor site. It's called the insulin receptor site on the surface of cells. And the best way to think about it is to think of insulin as the key that binds into a keyhole and unlocks the glucose pathway. So basically, it opens the door for glucose to enter the cell. This is only when the cells demand glucose. Now, when people fast, the body uses up the store of glycogen in the liver. Think of the liver as a battery, energy battery. So energy gets stored in the form of glycogen, and when the body needs energy, it gets the energy from the liver. The liver converts the glycogen into glucose, and the cells in the body uptakes the glucose, burns it as fuel, and muscle works, or cells work. So, being on a OMAD diet, my body has a relatively low glycogen store. Once the food or glycogen has been depleted, it takes several hours after a meal, and then for the rest of the day it's very low levels. That's how I control my blood sugar. So that's one. So that's the hypoglycemia, when there's low blood sugar, as opposed to hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, which is a symptom of diabetes. Not diabetes, but a symptom of diabetes. It's very important to make that distinction. Anyway, let's talk about the hypotension aspect of my fainting episodes yesterday. Now, hypotension is low blood pressure. I had this condition called benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, or the common term is enlarged prostate. Now, over the past 3.5 years, I've been eating plant-based, algae-based, and fungi-based diet, which doesn't have inflammatory triggers. Inflammatory triggers are found in animal protein, particularly in milk, because milk has bovine hormones and bovine proteins, which the body recognizes as foreign protein, and then they send these immunoglobulins and whatever else immunity was to get rid of it, because it regards it as a foreign thing. And sometimes the body's immunity can't differentiate between the foreign protein and its own body, and it starts eating itself. And all sort of crazy things happen. Cytokine storms, they call it, stuff like that. Anyway, it leads to, in women, conditions like lupus, painful periods, and in men, over time, it leads to this enlarged prostate thing. Anyway, I've shrunk it. But in parallel to enlarging the prostate, when the prostate enlarges, it sort of impinges on the bladder and the urinary duct. So the duct gets like squeezed, and it's it's just the impaired urination, that will be the way to say it. The volume and the velocity of the urine coming out is impaired, so it kind of dribbles, and you want to go pee very frequently, and then hardly anything comes out, Anyway, having shrunk my prostate, I resolved half the issue. I don't have the urge to pee when there's nothing to pee. When I do pee now, the volume is quite a lot, at least 300, 400 ml, sometimes as much as 700. Anyway, the medication, well, the one I take at least, Alfuzosin, sort of dilates these constricted urinary duct. That's how it works. But it's not very targeted. It does that, and it also dilates most other vascular structures. So when vascular structures are dilated, the volume, cross-sectional volume increases, and therefore blood pressure is lowered. It's an inevitable side effect of all these medications that help men pee. That's a given. So what happens is that my blood pressure is consistently below 120/80. That's the systolic and diastolic. Consistently below. Sometimes, not to say a lot below, but below, Sometimes it's 100/60, stuff like that. Now, hypotension is not an issue unless it becomes an issue. Okay, so the good indicator of whether it becomes this issue is from a supine position, that is in a sleeping position, you stand up. And if you start seeing stars, then you have hypotension. Then it's like an issue. So people who can't stand up from a sleeping position without seeing stars have no issue. If you stand up from a lying position and you see stars, you have an issue. So you have to sit on the bed first, wait a few minutes, and then you stand up, and all that. So I usually don't have those seeing stars, but when I do see stars, then I know I have low blood pressure, and I take some remedial action. Okay, that's one. Okay, let's go back and talk about hypoglycemia for a moment. When I first became being diagnosed with diabetes, I was warned of hypoglycemia because some of the medications, particularly glycoside, can cause hypoglycemia. Basically, one of the symptoms of diabetes is hyperglycemia, and the medications are designed to reduce the high blood sugar, but it may do its job too well, and you get too low blood sugar. So one of the things I did when I was first diagnosed with diabetes was to purposely starve myself and go into hypoglycemia to find out what it's like, what it feels like, what it's like from the inside, rather than reading for books and whatever. Okay, so it's part of one of my philosophical axioms. It's from Socrates, know thyself, so you need to know how your body is talking to you and stuff like that. So having gone and had blood sugar as low as 3.7 and know what it feels like. Sometimes when you're fasting, you get so hungry that when you eat, you shake, like your hands can't be still and all that. So that's one of the little things that happen when you're hypoglycemic. Anyway, that's that. So I know what it's like, what it feels like. Okay, so let's go back to hypotension. So when I take these medication, Alfuzosin. Now, Alfuzosin is a particularly, not to say good, but better of these medications that allow easy peeing. Although one of the side effects is hypotension, that's not what it's designed for. It's designed to make people pee easily. And it's a slow release medication. And you take it once a day, particularly after your meal at night. And then the next time you take it is, the next 24 hours. It has a half-life of about 22 hours. So meaning after you take the Alfuzosin, 22 hours later, you